So there I was, sitting directly across from the CEO of a major tech firm. The appetizer plates had been cleared, the main course was 10 minutes away, and suddenly, the conversation just died. I could literally hear the ice cubes melting in my glass. I looked at his tie, then at the window, and my mind was a total, terrifying blank. It felt like I was drowning in a room full of people.
Welcome back to Speak English with Luna. Today, we are conquering that social suffocation with 10 small talk hacks to never have an awkward silence. Julian, that story is a literal nightmare for most of our listeners, but I know you found a way out.
I did, Luna, but in that moment, my heart was racing. We often think an awkward silence is a failure of personality, but it's actually just a lack of a bridge. That night, I realized that small talk isn't about being the most interesting person in the room, it's about being the most curious.
I love that. Curiosity over charisma. We feel so much pressure to perform, but small talk is really just the social glue that leads to deeper connections. Let's dive right into how you turned that disaster into a 2-hour conversation. Julian, that moment at the dinner table, how did you finally break the ice? Give us our first big hack for today. I think everyone listening has felt that brain freeze when meeting someone new.
You're so right, Luna. The first thing I did was stop asking closed questions. You know, those questions that only get a yes or no answer. I used a technique I call the observation plus question sandwich. It's the ultimate B1 level trick because it gives the other person a hook to grab onto.
An observation sandwich? That sounds delicious, but how does it work in a real conversation? Do I just talk about the food?
Exactly. Or the room, or the music. Instead of asking a dry question like, do you like this city? You make a statement first. You say, I really love the architecture in this neighborhood. It feels so historic. What is your favorite part of the city? By sharing a small piece of your own opinion first, you lower the other person's guard. You aren't interrogating them, you're inviting them to join your perspective.
I love that. It's like giving a gift before asking for one. Now, let's do a quick vocabulary checkpoint for everyone listening. Julian, what are the 3 keywords for this block?
Let's look at awkward, which means uncomfortable or embarrassing. Break the ice, a classic idiom for starting a conversation in a social setting. And common ground, finding things you both like or agree on. If you find common ground, the silence disappears.
Perfect. Listeners, I have a specific request for you right now. Go to the comments and tell us what is your go-to icebreaker question when you meet someone new. Maybe it's about hobbies or maybe it's about travel. We want to see your best conversation starters. Julian, why is the standard "how are you" often a conversation killer?
Because it's a routine, Luna. It requires zero brain power. When someone says, how are you, our brains go on autopilot and we just say, fine, thanks. It ends the momentum before it even starts. To keep the flow, we need to be specific and slightly more curious.
Julian, we've covered the basics of breaking the ice, but now I want to shift gears. As our listeners move into this B2 level of English, they aren't just looking for survival phrases. They want to build real, lasting rapport. They want to feel at home in a conversation. How do we move from nice to meet you to a deep, meaningful connection without it feeling forced or, even worse, like a job interview?
That is the million-dollar question, Luna. To answer it, we have to look at the psychology of why we get stuck in the first place. Most people suffer from what psychologists call the spotlight effect. We feel like there is a giant neon light shining on us, and every grammatical error or and is being recorded and judged. But the truth? Whispering. Everyone else is also worried about their own spotlight.
That is such a relief to hear. So if everyone is just as nervous as I am, how do I use that to my advantage? You mentioned earlier that storytelling is key. Can you give us a concrete example of how to use storytelling to bridge that gap?
Absolutely. I'll tell you a story about a high-stakes networking event I attended in London a few years ago. I was in a room full of international diplomats and CEOs. I felt completely out of my element. My English was fine, of course, but the social weight of the room was heavy. I found myself standing next to a very intimidating woman who was a high-ranking official. The silence was deafening. Instead of asking about her job, which is what everyone else did, I noticed she was wearing a very unique, vintage-looking watch.
Oh, you used the observation technique again. But how did you make it a deep dive?
I said, "That's a fascinating timepiece. It looks like it has a story behind it." Notice, I didn't just say, "I like your watch." I used the word story. She lit up. She told me it belonged to her grandfather, who was a navigator. Suddenly, we weren't talking about politics or trade. We were talking about legacy, family, and history. We talked for 45 minutes. The hack here is the ACE method. Ask, connect, and elaborate.
ACE. Ask, connect, and elaborate. Let's break that down for our B2 learners. Ask is the observation, right? Connect is finding that emotional bridge, and elaborate is where we keep the engine running?
Precisely. Let's look at elaborate. This is where many English learners struggle because they give short answers. If she asks me, "Do you like London?" and I say, "Yes, it's big," the conversation dies. If I use the ACE method, I elaborate. "Yes, I love the energy here. It actually reminds me of a summer I spent in Chicago because of the mix of old and new buildings. Have you ever been to the States?"
See, that's the secret sauce. You gave her 3 different hooks to grab. You mentioned energy, Chicago, and architecture. Julian, there's another psychological concept I've heard you talk about, the pratfall effect. How does being imperfect actually help us in small talk?
This is my favorite piece of advice for language learners. The pratfall effect suggests that people who are generally competent become more likable when they make a small mistake. When you are speaking a second language, you might stumble over a word or forget an idiom. Instead of turning red and apologizing profusely, laugh at yourself. Say, "Oh, my brain just went on vacation for a second. What's the word for?" This makes you human. It makes you relatable. It lowers the social barrier.
I love that. My brain just went on vacation. I'm definitely stealing that one. So we're moving away from the perfection trap. We're using the ACE method to provide hooks, and we're looking for the story behind the stuff. Julian, when we talk about this B2 level of communication, we often talk about active listening. Is small talk more about talking or more about listening?
It is 70% listening, Luna, but it's generous listening. You aren't just waiting for your turn to speak, you're listening for emotional keywords. If someone says, "Work has been exhausting lately," the keyword isn't work, the keyword is exhausting.
So instead of asking, "Where do you work?" I should ask, "Oh no, what's been taking up all your energy lately?"
Exactly. You're validating their feeling. You're going deeper. That is how you turn a 30-second interaction into a 15-minute conversation. You follow the emotion, not just the facts. When you follow the emotion, you never run out of things to say because people love to talk about how they feel.
This is incredibly powerful, Julian. It's about shifting the focus from, "Am I saying this correctly?" to, "How is this person feeling and how can I connect with that?" It takes the pressure off our grammar and puts the focus on the human connection.
Spot on, Luna. Small talk is the porch of the house. You don't live on the porch, but you have to go through it to get inside where the warmth is. When you can master the porch, you're invited into the home.
All right, everyone, take a deep breath. We are officially entering the advanced zone. For our C1 learners, small talk isn't just about survival or breaking the ice. It's about social architecture. Julian, at this level of English, the nuances become so important. We're not just looking for common ground anymore. We're looking for emotional resonance.
Precisely, Luna. When you reach this level of proficiency, you start to navigate the principle of reciprocity. This is the sophisticated art of giving and taking in a conversation. An advanced hack I often teach my executive clients is the vulnerability loop. It's not about oversharing your deepest secrets, but rather revealing a nuanced feeling or a minor relatable struggle. For example, instead of saying, "I'm busy," you might say, "I've been feeling a bit overwhelmed trying to balance this new project with my personal life. I suspect you might know that feeling of spinning too many plates at once."
Spinning too many plates. What a great idiom. And by saying that, you're inviting the other person to be authentic with you. You're moving past the surface level chatter into something much more substantial.
Exactly. You're creating a safe space for authenticity. And that brings us to our golden word for today's episode. The word is resonance. RESONANCE.
Resonance. I love the way that sounds. It feels very musical. What does it mean in the context of a high-level conversation, Julian?
In physics, resonance happens when two objects vibrate at the same frequency. In social psychology, it's that click you feel when your words and the other person's experiences align perfectly. To achieve resonance, you must develop the ability to read the subtext, the unspoken emotions behind the vocabulary. It's the difference between a flat exchange of information and a vibrant connection.
That is such a powerful concept for our listeners to strive for. It's not just about the words, it's about the frequency. Now, Julian, it's time for the community challenge. What is one high-level task our listeners can try this week?
I want to challenge everyone to use the 5-second pause. It sounds counterintuitive when we're talking about avoiding awkward silences, but this is a power move. The next time you ask a question and the person gives you a short, standard answer, don't rush to fill the gap. Just wait. Maintain a warm, curious expression and count to 5 in your head. 9 times out of 10, the other person will feel the social vacuum and fill it with something much more interesting and honest.
The social vacuum. That is brilliant. It takes a lot of confidence to hold that silence, but that is exactly what a C1 speaker does. Listeners, that is your mission. Try the 5-second pause this week. Then come back to our community page and tell us, using our golden word, resonance, how it went. Did the silence lead to a deeper connection? It's time for our word tour. Let's lock in these 5 essential terms so you can use them today. Julian, are you ready? Let's go.
I'm ready, Luna. First up, common ground. This is finding that shared interest. Example, since we both love traveling to Italy, we found common ground immediately.
Number 2, break the ice.
That's starting the interaction. I used a light-hearted comment about the long line to break the ice with the person next to me.
Number 3, the ACE method.
Ask, connect, and elaborate. Instead of giving a one-word answer, I used ACE to keep the conversation flowing naturally.
Number 4, the pratfall effect.
Being relatable through minor mistakes. I forgot the name of the restaurant, but the pratfall effect made us both laugh and feel more connected.
And finally, our golden word, resonance.
Deep emotional alignment. When we talked about our career goals, there was a beautiful resonance between our perspectives. 5 words to master any social situation.
Julian, thank you so much for sharing these incredible hacks with us today. I feel so much more confident about my next social event already. I hope our listeners feel that same spark of inspiration.
It was truly my pleasure, Luna. Just remember, a conversation is simply a bridge you build together, one brick at a time. Don't be afraid of the silence. Use it as a space to breathe and truly listen to the person in front of you.
Beautifully said. Listeners, if you found value in today's episode, please subscribe and share it with a friend. Go out there, find your resonance, and we'll see you next time on Speak English with Luna. Stay inspired and keep talking.